burpee karo.
Again, my slides. I think maybe I'm not sure whether it is my computer keyboard has to be changed or what. But never had this problem before. It moves sometimes and sometimes it's stuck. It's not more. Okay. So now some of the newer there, I mean, because of this, especially these high-grade tumors, leiomyosarcomas, cosmosarcomas, the prognosis has really not improved over the last decade or so. So now people are trying targeted therapies, other agents like trabectedin, olanzapine, phase 2 trials of nilotinib, cabozantinib, with temozolomide. These are ongoing, and people are also trying immunotherapy with nivolumab and ipilimumab. So I'll stop here. It's so uterine sarcomas are relatively rare, probably less than 5%. So, but still, we do come across them in the perimenopausal and postmenopausal age group.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your nice and elaborate presentation. Sir, we have some questions in our chat box. Before that,
yes, I will look at the chat box.
Yes, sir.
Okay, 1 minute. Do you recommend image-guided core biopsy for the diagnosis of leiomyosarcoma? No, I don't. If you're not going to, if it's very advanced disease, then we may have to. We're not going to be operating. Then we may have to do this sort of image biopsies. But otherwise, most of the time we are doing hysterectomy and making the diagnosis on the operative specimen. LDH is a very non-specific marker. So it can be, increased in lymphomas. It can be increased in germ cell tumors. Yeah, it may be elevated in some of these sarcomas as well. But again, very, very non-specific. The question about removal of ovaries. Yes, like I said, that leiomyosarcoma, it is not like endometrial stromal sarcoma. The estrogen receptors, progesterone receptors may be positive in a small proportion. But if it's a relatively young patient, premenopausal patient, then it is okay to keep the ovaries. Dose of megestrol acetate, hydroxyprogesterone acetate. So megestrol acetate, yeah, they come as 40 milligram tablets. So up to 320 milligrams can be given. So 160 gram BD or even 80 milligrams BD, we can start. Medroxyprogesterone acetate has to be again a fairly high dose. IUCD in endometrial carcinoma. Yeah, in patients with young patients with endometrial carcinoma, it's not in this topic, but I'll answer it. Only fertility is desired. We'll have to counsel the patient saying that the risk of recurrence is about 14–15%. So if they are willing to take the risk, if they are so, there is a role for conservative treatment. MRI scan is a must. Before you decide on preserving the uterus, you have to do an MRI scan, make sure there is no myometrial invasion, that it is confined to the endometrium, and we can give oral progesterones either alone or in combination with the levonorgestrel IUCD. The theoretical argument is that this the IUCD gives you local progesterone as well as decreases the amount of oral progesterone, because it's very difficult to take very high doses of megestrol acetate or medroxyprogesterone acetate. It makes the patient sick, and they don't. The compliance is poor. So, in an effort to increase the compliance, you could try a combination of IUCD and oral progesterone.
Hannah, with your permission, can I ask a question to Mr. Dr. Abraham?
Yes, sir. Yes, Appa.
Shehna?
Yes.
So, Dr. Abraham, I am Dr. Mariam from Dhaka.
Yes.
So my one patient came. Am I audible?
Yes.
That's okay. One of my patient just before during this Ramadan came, she had irregular PV bleeding. She's 32, 6-year married, no issue. So she came with irregular bleeding somewhere, DNC done, and it was complex endometrial mass with histopathology with atypia. And on ultrasonogram, there should have, from the uterus posterior wall, there is a maybe like submucous myoma or something vascular, with vascularity. So MRI done, and it showed a mass, not well defined, but mass on the posterior wall of the uterus projecting into the endometrial cavity. So with this report, and we have to, we will consider her fertility for preservation. And with one histological report, what treatment now I can give?
You have not got a histological diagnosis of cancer, no? So she requires a
No,
hysteroscopy.
atypia, only
Yes.
complex.
So please do a hysteroscopy and repeat a biopsy.
Yes.
And please look at the MRI scan very carefully to see whether
Yes.
there's any myometrial invasion.
They
So
said 50%, half.
No myometrial invasion. No.
Myometrial
50%.
invasion, there's no chance, there's no role for conservative treatment. You have to do hysterectomy.
But am I sure that it's malignant, or I have to go again for a biopsy?
Yes, you have to do hysteroscopy and biopsy.
Yes, yes.
You can't do hysterectomy without biopsy, no?
Yes, yes. Now, once she just on March, only 1 month back, she had done this DNC somewhere, but it may not be.
Yeah, but that
So
did
I
not
will
show
have to
malignancy.
repeat
That
again.
did not show malignancy. You can review the slide.
Yes,
You
yes.
can review the slide, or I can do a repeat biopsy, and best
Okay,
is.
okay. Yes, I told her that I will go for hysteroscopy and biopsy, and then we'll decide the treatment, because she is very eager for her fertility.
Okay.
Scope of the fertility.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Now, in that case, I can give this interval period. I can give
Please
progesterone.
also, you're saying it's a vascular mask and all that. So please review the history.
Yes.
And has she ever had, could it be a choriocarcinoma or something? So don't, just be focused on endometrial carcinoma. It could be something else. Could it be an invasive mole or something like that? So please, if you have any doubt, you do a beta HCG also.
Yes, yes, yes. CA125 normal, beta HCG not yet done. And I think, yes, I will do this procedure. And I talked with, Shahana, I talked with Dr. Kamal also.
Yes, yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay.
There is another question in the chat box. Yes, thank you, Appa. There is another question in the chat box. That is Dr. Jannatul. She did surgery of the patients at 75 years, and she did the extrafacial hysterectomy with bilateral pelvic lymphadenectomy, and the immunohistory report was adenosarcoma, Mullerian adenosarcoma, high grade with heterogeneous elements, and there is the ER positive, PR negative, and other tumor markers, cytokeratin positive, vimentin positive, CD positive, and she didn't do the bilateral para-aortic lymphadenectomy, only pelvic lymphadenectomy. The tumor was limited to the polypoidal mass only, no LVSI. What will be the next treatment plan now? Sir, please. And other the faculties died, Dr. Bafna sir, or anyone can answer.
Yeah, I think we'll have to discuss this in the multi-disciplinary team meeting.
Yes, sir.
And the adenosarcoma, it's not as aggressive as the other types of sarcomas, but still, you can consider radiation therapy or chemotherapy. But again, these are not very effective. But I think this will have to be a multidisciplinary team decision.
Sir, we have several questions. That if a patient, the 50-year patient, having the endometrial carcinoma diagnosis at her first the DNC, but after the surgery, the laparotomy, the report was carcinosarcoma. Why this type of? Sometimes, several times, we have seen that this type of dual type of the histopathology report. Is it due to the carcinoma that was previously it was thought that the carcinoma, it is metastasis to the myometrium, so it is sometimes is mimic whether it is carcinoma or carcinosarcoma. That is the cause.
Yeah, on endometrial biopsy, these mistakes can be made because even in carcinosarcoma, because the carcinomatous part may look like high-grade endometrial carcinoma or serous carcinoma. So it's difficult on a small endometrial biopsy. On the main specimen, the pathologist should be able to make the diagnosis. So, I mean, we all think the pathologist's job is easy, but it's very, very difficult. And for an oncology center to have a good oncopathologist is, worth the weight in gold. So it is, you really need a very good pathologist. So if there is a problem, then you have to, go to a different center and have the slides reviewed. But yes, mistakes can happen because it's because many of these, like I said, the features are very similar. Even the immunohistochemistry, all these are a lot of overlap is there. So it is not very easy to make these diagnoses.
So is the leiomyosarcoma precursor of the leiomyoma?
No, there is nothing to, it's the fibroids going on to leiomyosarcoma is very, very rare.
Yeah.
Probably less than 1 in 1,000. So most of them arise de novo.
So another question is that sometimes, usually we get the report of the leiomyosarcoma after myomectomy or after hysterectomy. In that case, and sometimes the patient comes with either the menorrhagia or the mass in the abdomen. In that cases, the young patient, they go for the myomectomy, or sometimes it may be total hysterectomy. After that, the report comes to the leiomyosarcoma. In that cases, how can we differentiate preoperatively whether it is leiomyoma or leiomyosarcoma?
Like I said, it's very, very difficult. Imaging is may help. MRI scan may help that the margins are not regular. There may be slight irregularity in the margin, suggesting some sort of infiltration. But it's very difficult. Even PET scan, PET CT is not very helpful. MRI scan may give some clue. So it's only a high degree of suspicion. You assume, as an oncologist, you have to assume. The problem is these are rare. So most of the time they are leiomyomas. So as for a generalist, he only thinks of leiomyoma, does not think of cancer. Whereas oncology centers, we think of cancer always. So that is a problem. But I think the education has to be that, especially in perimenopausal women, be very, very suspicious. And if possible, do all your morcellation and everything inside a bag. That's the only way we can prevent this. But otherwise, it is really an unfortunate catastrophe that happens.
But sir, usually we know that is leiomyoma, if patient doesn't complain of any pain or it is not rapid growing. But sarcoma, it sometimes the patient complains of the pain and also it is rapid growing. In that case, we may suspect that.
Yes, this rapid growth is always said that it suggests leiomyosarcoma, but many patients with a large fibroid, they may not have realized when they had the first fibroid has been there for a long time, they don't know. So it's very difficult. Actually, it doesn't always mean that
it is malignancy. Yes.
Yeah, it's malignancy, but still, yes. Suppose you are sure that she did not have a fibroid 3 months ago or 6 months ago, then you can say, yes, this is likely to be a leiomyosarcoma. But most of the time, we don't know that, when they may not, patient doesn't have a scan 6 months ago or 1 year ago. If they have a scan and they didn't have it, then we can say that this is something new.
Oh, okay. If these patients come in leiomyosarcoma with just only simple hysterectomy and the remaining, keeping the ovary in bag, then can we go for the revision surgery for these patients? Even in perimenopausal age, that is 30, 35 years, this is only simple hysterectomy. In that cases, can we go for the revision surgery?
So for leiomyosarcoma, it is not really necessary to remove the ovaries if a patient is 35 years old. But for endometrial stromal sarcoma, yes, we'll have to give a, probably, and you can do a laparoscopy and remove the ovaries.
But leiomyosarcoma, it's also aggressive disease, and it is the recurrence is 5 years survival is only in early stage disease also around 50%. In that cases, also will not go for the removal of the ovary and. In that cases,
Like I
sarcoma
said, leiomyosarcoma, does Bafna want to answer that? Leiomyosarcoma, nowadays they say it's not necessary to remove the ovaries.
Yeah, I think I would like to answer this question.
Sir.
Leiomyosarcoma stage 1, the 5-year survival rate is
Yes,
just
sir.
50%. That means 50% are going to recur. So in my personal experience, I have found that many of the leiomyosarcomas are estrogen and progesterone receptor positive. And because chemotherapy has not shown to be beneficial in leiomyosarcoma, especially in stage 1, I feel that it's better to remove the ovaries so that the source of estrogen and progesterone are removed. And there has been some study done where instead of chemotherapy, we have used progesterone in stage 1 leiomyosarcoma, and it is supposed to be as effective as chemotherapy. So I feel that in perimenopausal women, at least in stage 1, if you have not removed the ovaries, and if the leiomyosarcoma shows ER and PR receptors positive, it's better to remove the ovaries because chance of recurrence is 50% otherwise.
Yes.
So better to remove the ovaries.
What is about lymph node?
Lymph nodes, I don't think you have to remove the lymph nodes because spread to the lymph nodes is very, very unusual unless the lymph nodes are bulky.
Yes, sir.
So very rarely you find lymph node metastasis in leiomyosarcoma. At least I have not seen a single case in last 32 years.
No, see, the lymph node spread is less than 5%. So
Yeah,
it's
very unusual.
We don't go after the lymph nodes. Similarly, estrogen receptors is also less than 5%. But in leiomyosarcoma, if they are positive, yes, of course, and perimenopausal, you can remove. But if it's a 35-year-old, you'll have to think twice. But endometrial stromal sarcoma is different. It is definitely estrogen sensitive, receptor responsive.
Just
endometrial
last week,
stromal
Abraham,
sarcoma,
just
you have
last
to-
week.
Leiomyosarcoma is plus minus.
Yeah, Abraham, just last week I had a 30-year-old girl who had a myomectomy.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it turned out to be leiomyosarcoma. And the myomectomy specimen was sent for pathological examination, and it was strongly ER and PR positive. And because she had only myomectomy and uterus was not removed, so I asked them for a repeat surgery, staging laparotomy, because I thought that myomectomy would have caused spillage of the cells into the peritoneal cavity also.
Yeah, that's
So I did a laparotomy, I did a TH also. I removed the ovaries also because I was knowing that the patient has got strong ER and PR receptors positive. And I also did a omentectomy to rule out any spread to the omentum. And then I went and did literature survey, and there is one trial, GOG 277 trial, which has compared chemotherapy versus observation. Chemotherapy with gemcitabine and docetaxel versus observation. And they found that there's no difference whether you give chemotherapy or whether you observe. So what I have decided for this patient is that since he is strongly ER and PR positive and chance of recurrence is 50%, why not give hormonal therapy? So I'm planning to give mezostol acetate 160 mg daily, at least for few months.
Yeah,
Presuming that it is going to help in
Afna,
suppressing
this patient-
leiomyosarcoma metastasis.
No, this patient who had myomectomy and spill of tumor probably requires chemo also, because this is a bad situation. I mean, you did the right thing in doing laparotomy and checking for tumor everywhere, but still there may be microscopic spill.
And there might be staging laparotomy, unfortunately, was negative. But even then, there might be a macroscopic deposits in the
Quite
peritoneal
likely
cavity.
that within 3
So-
months she will come back with tumor.
Yeah,
Within 3
that
months she will come back with
explain
tumor.
to the patient, because even in advanced stages, stage 2 and stage 3 and stage 4, chemotherapy has never shown improvement in survival. It only can delay recurrence, but overall survival has never been improved with chemotherapy in any sarcoma for that matter. So you have to counsel them properly, the benefit and harms of chemotherapy. So you may give chemotherapy or you may not give chemotherapy. Like we suggested, chemotherapy is a good option.
So what is the message from here to the all our the participants, if any type of sarcoma, the diagnosis after the surgery, we must advise for the ERPR. Did that? ERPR.
I think so. I think so because chemotherapy
Yes.
has not shown improvement in survival
Yes, sir.
for any stage 1 to stage 4. Chemotherapy can only delay recurrences, but overall survival has never been improved in any of the studies. So I feel there are only few studies done with hormones. So if I think if ER and PR are positive, like you offer hormonal therapy for endometrial stromal sarcoma, similarly, if ER and PR are strongly positive with leiomyosarcoma, hormonal therapy may be useful. There are some few case reports or very small series showing benefit of hormonal therapy in leiomyosarcoma. I think we have to have further studies to really know what is the benefit of hormonal therapy. But personally, I feel hormonal therapy is good, especially in younger people.
As we know, that is the ERPR positive in low-grade endometrial stromal endometrial sarcoma. Even after that, why do you not advise the estrogen or progesterone or hormone therapy in low-grade stromal sarcoma?
No, we
Low-grade endometrial stromal
it is
sarcoma.
reserved for recurrence. I mean, we don't give. You see, in early stage, usually
Yes.
after surgery, usually it's a stage 1, stage 2. So we can keep them. If you have removed everything, then we can keep them on follow-up and give it when recurrence happens. There's no need to give them how long you will give, because recurrence may happen after 10 years, 20 years,
Yeah.
15 years. You can't keep them on hormones for so long.
Correct.
Thank you,
I
sir.
would like to agree with Abraham. No role of hormonal therapy for stage 1 and stage 1 endometrial stromal sarcoma.
Low-grade.
Surgery itself is enough.
Yes, sir.
Probably stage 2 onwards, you may give hormonal therapy for low-grade endometrial stromal sarcoma. But stage 1, there's no role.
Yes, sir. Sir, we have more 3 questions. Is there?
Okay, that was very interesting discussions. And
There are more 3 questions in the chat box from Dr. Murium Faruqi. Can degenerated fibroid give features of malignancy in histopathology?
yes, degenerative fibroid. See, these are all pathologists have to be careful, because, like I said, many of these benign conditions are mimicking tumors. So, right from hemorrhage into a leiomyoma, degeneration of leiomyoma, all this, the pathologist has to be careful in making a diagnosis.
Another
So-
question is also from Murium Faruqi, that how will you counsel a patient for conservative treatment in endometrial carcinoma when fertility preservation needed?
So, like I said, I mean, first of all, you have to be sure that proper investigations have been done, like MRI scan, and make sure there is no evidence of deep biometric invasion or any extrauterine spread. And then you have to tell them that there is a risk that this hormonal treatment may not work. In about 15% of the time, it will recur. And the other thing you have to tell them is, we are giving you a chance for fertility by giving you hormones, but we have to check every 3 months. You have to do a curettage and make sure there is regression. Maximum you can wait for is about 6 months. So if it's still persisting, if there is no regression and it is persisting after 6 months, then I would advise them to go ahead with hysterectomy. But after, so you give them the hormones for 3 months, then you repeat the biopsy. And if it is persisting, you give for another 3 months, repeat the biopsy, and then you decide. I mean, to go on for more than 6 months is risky. So again, you have to counsel them all over again, saying that now 6 months and it is still there. Still the patient may not agree. So then you keep them on hormones, but you have to tell them that this is a big risk now. And we have seen patients that come back after even 1 year, 2 years with bone secondaries and widespread metastasis. So if they haven't responded within 6 months, I would say hysterectomy. So, and you have to tell them that hormones can fail in about 15% of the time, but it is worth a try if fertility is very, very important for them.
Another question is, if patient suffers from vasomotor symptoms, does
Thank
she
you, sir.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't get that. Patient suffers from?
So this is the questions in the chat box.
Okay, I'm not able to. Oh, vasomotor symptoms.
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, if she's having vasomotor symptoms, first of all, I mean, you can try other things rather than put her back on estrogen. I don't think patients with endometrial stromal sarcoma or endometrial cancer, giving them estrogens is not a good idea. So you will have to use other like venlafaxine or something like that to control the vasomotor symptoms.
Thank you, sir. If there is no other questions, then we go for our next session. Our next session is the adjuvant treatment in endometrial carcinoma. And the speaker of that session is Dr. Shorupa Mitru. Dr. Shorupa, please.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, ma'am, for inviting me here and giving me a chance to speak. So, is my screen visible?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So, I'll start right about
Yes.
the adjuvant treatment about endometrial cancer. And as we all know, it is a most mind-boggling and with every day new research coming on and the moleculars and the histopathology, everything, it makes it very tedious to find a treatment for the patient, and it is very chaotic, and sometimes and every time a new patient comes, we are in a dilemma. So I'll try to make it simple. Adjuvant treatment, I'll focus more on the radiation therapy part. We have, after the surgery, most of the patients, they do need some form of adjuvant therapy. So we are talking of endometrial carcinoma. So it could be a radiation therapy or a chemotherapy. The radiation therapy, again, there are different types. It can be an external radiation therapy. It can be a vaginal brachytherapy or a combination of both. Similarly, the chemotherapy can be sequential or concurrent. Now, this is a FIGO staging we all are conversant with, so not going to spend much time over that, but that is not the final. That is not all that determines the treatment of the patient or the prognosis of the patient. So there are other factors also, like we know this, the age, the grade of the tumor, the pathology of the tumor, the lymphovascular space invasion, the tumor size, the lymph node dissection. These are a few of them. There are others coming up. So that is why we have these days the risk group. So it is not only the stage of the tumor, it is also which risk group it is. So I'll come to the risk group a few slides later. So first, I'm going to talk about the conventional treatment which we advise to our patients of endometrial carcinoma according to the stages. Of course, we need to keep in mind the risk groups also. Many times, early stage, but it is a high risk group. Similarly, it can be a later stage, but a lower risk group. So these things we need to have consideration for when we advise the treatment to our patient. Right now, the molecular pathology has come into practice, but it has not been used into clinical practice while categorizing the treatment. So what is the role of radiation therapy in stage 1 and stage 2? So we all know there are about 6 randomized trials. So these are the 4 trials, the ELDERS, the POTIC1, the GOG99, and the MRC-NCIC, which compares observation versus pelvic radiation therapy. There are 2 other trials which compares the pelvic radiation therapy versus intravaginal therapy. That means no observation. So before we go on to the next slide, we need to remember stage 1 and stage 2, they are not only stage 1 and stage 2. There are other factors also, which is the myometrial invasion. It can be less than 50%. It can be more than 50%. The no myometrial invasion is no longer in our histopathology. So based on this and the grades of the tumor, it can be low risk or the intermediate risk. So these are the trials. Like I said, these are the 4 trials which compared the observation versus the pelvic radiation therapy, and the POTIC2 and the Sorby et al. Trial, which compares the pelvic radiation therapy versus intravaginal brachytherapy. What does the POTIC1 trial say? I'm not going to go into the details. It has taken the stage 1B, G2, G3, and 1C also G1, G2, and it has excluded the higher grades. No lymphadenopathy has been done, and it is basically they have compared the node, that is observation versus pelvic radiation therapy. And what they saw is external radiation therapy did reduce the vaginal recurrence, but at the cost of increased toxicity. The toxicity with radiation therapy was about 25% versus 6%. So we do reduce the vaginal recurrence, but at a cost. Then comes the Sorbitol trial, which also is a trial which has compared now the observation versus brachytherapy, not the pelvic radiation, observation versus the brachytherapy. And the groups of the patients are the 1A, 1B, and the grade 1 and 2. And here, what do we see? There is no difference in survival and no difference in the GI or the GU toxicity. So this brings us to more studies, more understanding. We have to understand whether which are the patients will go for observation or brachytherapy or pelvic radiation therapy. So we have more studies. The POTEC 2 study, this actually, the inclusion criteria differed from the POTEC 1 study group. And here they had included the patients which were stage 1, of course, but more than 60 years age with grade 3 and less than 50% invasion, grade 1 and 2, more than 50% invasion, and it included the endocervical gland involvement also. The lymph node dissection was not done. And the results, the conclusion of the studies was that vaginal brachytherapy was effective in preventing vaginal recurrence with slightly higher pelvic failure rate, but no impact on the recurrence-free survival or overall survival. So this study, which is also by Sorbet et al. This, again, randomized study, it has compared the same group of patients with the risk factor. It has taken the grade 3 also, and more than 50% myometrial invasion. It has compared the intravaginal brachytherapy with pelvic radiotherapy. And here the difference from the other studies was that the pelvic radiotherapy, the brachytherapy was allowed in both the arms. Here the nodal sampling was done. And what was the outcome? We saw that there was no difference in overall survival, and toxicity was significantly higher in the combined arm. So here the brachytherapy and pelvic radiation and brachytherapy together, they were compared. There was no difference in survival, whereas the toxicity was more in the combined arm. So what was the summary of these trials? Observation, yes. Least morbidity, increased local recurrence rate, pelvic and vaginal, and it was not the best therapeutic ratio for all the groups of the patients. Pelvic radiation, it did reduce recurrence. It was very effective in reducing the recurrence, but the morbidity profile was much higher. So intravaginal brachytherapy was preferred in many of the cases in stage 1 and 2 carcinomas. So why? Because it was as good as pelvic radiotherapy to control the vaginal recurrences minus its toxicity. So stage 1, less than 50% myometrial invasion, grade 1, grade 2, all PG students, please remember. So this is just the nutshell. Stage 1 less than 50% myometrial invasions, and grade 1 and 2, that is, they are the low risk and the intermediate risk. So here, observation is the best mode of treatment. Most of the patients have very low pelvic recurrence rate, and observation is the best mode of treatment. Now, what happens to the intermediate risk group? That is, when the stage 1, the myometrial invasion is more than 50%. In the previous group, the myometrial invasion was less than 50%. So stage 1, less than 50% myometrial invasion, you can very well go for observation. And all the studies have said that there is no role of brachytherapy. But here is the intermediate risk group where more than 50% has been involved at stage 1, grade 1, grade 2. So here also the studies are the same, the POTEC 2 and the Sorbet et al. Study, and they have said that intravaginal brachytherapy is sufficient and pelvic radiotherapy can very well be omitted. So the conclusion is that in this group of patients, intravaginal brachytherapy is indicated. There are some patients where observation can also be an option. Pelvic radiotherapy may only be considered if lymph node dissection is not done, but this is also this has to be customized according to the patients. So most of the patients, either brachytherapy or observation for some patients. Now comes the stage 1. This is a grade 3. Till now we were considering grade and 2 patients. Now, stage 1 and the grade 3 tumor, they come into the high intermediate risk or the high risk. So, when in this group of tumor, it is less than 50% myometrial invasion, regardless of the LVSI, it is then the high intermediate risk. More than 50% myometrial invasion, grade 3, regardless of LVSI, it is the high risk. So, the myometrial invasion in a grade 3 tumor are very important. So here again, I won't go into the detail because we have discussed already the POTAKE 1 trial, the POTAKE 2 trial, and the conclusion when we collected the data of these group of patients from these trials, we found that in no myometrial invasion, where the patient grade 3 and there is no myometrial invasion, they could be observed or at the most given intravaginal brachytherapy. But again, as we know, no myometrial invasion is no more considered in our staging. So less than myometrial invasions are often treated with adjuvant radiation. But again, here also we need to see which group of patients. So this is another study where this is the Keys, HMs, and the Roberts. They have published this in 2004 in the Gynec Oncology Journal. And here they have taken the high intermediate risk group. And the conclusion was there was a strong benefit of adjuvant radiation therapy in more than 50% of the cases. So more than 50% of the cases, more than 50% myometrial invasion, high intermediate risk groups, they can be given brachytherapy in some of the patients. So again, you need to select these patients. Now, stage 1, more than 50% myometrial invasions, high risk. So these are the patients where there is high risk of pelvic recurrence. It is more than 25%. There is extensive surgical staging is recommended in this group of patients. So in this group of patients, last time we were talking about the patients who have come with an incomplete surgery. If they belong to this group, so there the surgical staging is highly recommended. And if not done, then the pelvic radiation therapy is added. But of course, we need to stress that the pelvic radiation therapy is not a substitute of a good surgical staging. So surgical grade 1, stage 1, grade 3 tumors more than 50%. If the lymph node dissection has been done, EBRT can be given with limited fields according to the EORTC study. And if the lymph node dissection is not done, they say that chemotherapy may be given either with the concomitant or sequential. Now, what happens when the cervical involvement is there? That is the stage 2. Now, cervical involvement, we do not mean the cervical glands involvement. It is the deep stromal involvement. Now, if the lymph node dissection they come into the high risk group. So, if the lymph node dissection has been done, then vaginal brachytherapy is an option even in stage 2, provided they are lymphovascular invasion negative and G1, G2. But even if the lymph node dissection has been done, but it is the grade 3 and lymphovascular invasion positive, then external, that is a pelvic radiation therapy and the brachytherapy has to be given. But if the lymph node dissection has not been done, like I said, they should be given the option of a surgical staging by referring them to the gynae oncologist. But if they are G1, G2, so radiation therapy and brachytherapy is needed. And if it is lymphovascular invasion positive, then radiation therapy and chemotherapy. What does the MSK-CC do? In MSK-CC, the cervical stromal invasion, if the cervical stromal invasion is less than 50%, grade 1, grade 2, they give intravaginal brachytherapy with an adequate lymphadenectomy. But if the cervical invasion, if the stromal invasion is less than 50%, grade 3, then it is pelvic radiation therapy is given irrespective of the lymphadenectomy. What happens in stage 3? Stage 3 is an increased risk of both locoregional and distant relapse. So all these patients, most of them, they need pelvic radiation therapy irrespective of the extent of the surgical staging. So this we have seen, will be seen in the POTAKE 3 trial, where concomitant chemotherapy has also been added. So most of the patients in stage 3 disease, they fail mostly in the abdomen. And the investigators, they have evaluated the whole abdomen irradiation also in some of the previous studies. Of course, we are not giving them these days. So these days, what we are doing is in isolated adnexal involvement treated with pelvic radiation therapy, then the 5-year survival is seen to be about 75 to 80%. Now, if the pelvic lymph node involvement is there, then post-operative pelvic radiation therapies, even then the survival is quite good, 60 to 72%. Now, if the para-aortic, that is 3C2R, these are the high-risk group and they have been given an extended pelvic radiation therapy, extended field, and here the disease-free survival is a little less. It goes to 40 to 50%. So chemotherapy, I'll just skip these slides. Adjuvant chemotherapy, various combinations have been tried, radiation therapy followed by adjuvant chemotherapy as in the GOG34 trial, sequential, that is CTRT, and adjuvant chemotherapy. These are seen in the EORTC and the MANGO trial. And radiotherapy versus chemotherapy, they have been seen in these two trials. And we will also see, so these are many more trials. So these are the trials which we are looking up to, the POTAKE 3 trial and the GOG 249 trial. So their eligibility criteria is almost the same, but there has been a difference in the randomization and the radiation therapy. Here in the POTAKE trial, you see the first arm is the pelvic radiation therapy alone. So they have compared the pelvic radiation therapy with pelvic radiation therapy plus chemotherapy, that is cisplatin, followed by carboplatin and paclitaxel. That is, the arm 2 gets the pelvic radiation therapy with 2 cycles of concomitant chemotherapy followed by 4 cycles of adjuvant chemotherapy. But here in the GOG trial, they have compared the pelvic radiation therapy with vaginal brachytherapy plus chemotherapy. So the take-home message is that in 3A and 3B and 3C, so what we do, there are plenty of studies, plenty of trials. So what do the MSKCC do and what most of us are doing in 3A and 3B? We are giving concomitant chemoradiotherapy with cisplatin on day 1 and day 8, like I said just now. This is like the POTAKE 3 trial. The ESMO also gives the recommendations as in 3A, 3B, and C1. C1 is the pelvic lymph nodes only involved. We give radiation therapy and chemotherapy. But when it becomes 3C2, that is when the para-aortic lymph nodes are involved, then we need to give a chemotherapy and radiation therapy, of course, but with an extended field. So high risk non-endometrioid. So all these Dr. Abraham has already talked about serous and clear cell carcinoma and carcinosarcoma. So I'm not going to repeat them. That was a very good lecture. In advanced. So this is a situation with most of us, all the Asian countries, we do face in our day-to-day practice. Advanced beyond 3A with a residual. That is, a patient has come to us with a surgery, incomplete surgery done somewhere outside. So what do we do with these patients? Surgery, of course, the surgical oncologists need to see them, and surgically, she would probably do a surgery if R1 resection is expected or an R0 resection. But there's not much evidence of whether lymph node dissection should be done or not. Overall survival benefit above the R1 resection. Histology has no prognostic role. So most of the time it is a palliative surgery in such patients. So these are actually very unfortunate patients. Sometimes we have seen exentration is also required if the surgeon thinks that he will give a R0 resection. Otherwise, palliative chemotherapy and palliative radiotherapy are good options to relieve from symptoms. Now, a few, just 4-5 slides, because this is coming up in big way, that although this time what we were talking about is going to be the history right now in a few years. So we are coming with this is the guidelines, the 2020, the ESGO, ESTRO, and the ESP guidelines. And here they have considered the molecular pathology. And what does the molecular pathology do? I know not all of us are equipped with this, but soon we will be. So better we know about them. arguments for treatment decision. How are so later on probably if we see a low risk tumor who probably would be sent for a brachytherapy, and if the pole mutators are mutated, so probably we will not give her any treatment. So this is how it is going to actually influence our treatment in future. P53 abnormal or overexpressed, they are poor prognosis, and we need to, the present guidelines, they have said that all P53 tumors, if you read this paper, all P53 abnormal tumors should be given a radio chemotherapy. So the MMR deficient tumors, these are actually intermediate prognosis, and most of them have been seen, they are not very responsive to chemotherapeutical agents. So what are the recommendations? Now, molecular classification is encouraged in all endometrial carcinomas, especially in the high grades. Pole mutation analysis may be omitted in low risk and intermediate risk tumors. So if you do not have the provision, so probably your pole mutation may be omitted in the low risk because it is not going to really make much of a difference. That means the patients will not be overtreated. Now, the recommendations of prognostic risk groups integrating the molecular markers. So what all do we need to integrate with the molecular markers? So histopathologic type, the grade we need to see, the myometrial invasion, the LVSI. The LVSI we need to see whether they are focal or substantial. They should be recorded. So these are the recommendations which the pathologists, they all follow these days. Now, what is the difference between the focal and substantial LVSI? The focal LVSI is defined as the presence of a single focus around the tumor. But substantial LVSI or multifocal or diffuse LVSI, which we see, it is the arrangement of the LVSI, it is the presence of tumor cells in 5 or more lymphovascular spaces. So all these probably a pathologist will be able to explain far better. Now, a very summary and in very short, the summary is prognostic markers, low risk. This is what we have already spoken. If you do not have the molecular classification, so low risk patients are the stage 1, low grade LVSI negative. So what do we do with these tumors? Like I said, no adjuvant treatment is required. In case you know the molecular classification, stage 1 or 2, pole mutated, they are very good, excellent tumors, and any adjuvant treatment can very well be omitted. Stage 3 and 4, the pathogenic pole mutation known, that there are upcoming data. I'm not discussing them now. That is how the how the molecular classification is going to change our treatment. I'm not discussing them now. So the intermediate group, so these are the 1B low grade LVSI negative or LVSI focal. So LVSI negative or focal, they come in the intermediate group, or the stage 1A high grade but LVSI negative or focal. Again, stage 1A non-endometrioid, serous, clear cell, undifferentiated without myometrial invasion. So all these tumors, they come in the intermediate group. So what is the recommendation for this group of patients? Adjuvant brachytherapy can be recommended to decrease the vaginal recurrence. Omission of vaginal brachytherapy may be considered only for patients who are less than 60 years. Third group is the high intermediate group. And which are the patients? Stage 1, substantial LVSI, regardless of grade and depth of invasion. So when there is substantial LVSI, it is regardless of grade and depth of invasion. Stage 1B, endometrioid, high grade, regardless of LVSI. So high grade and regardless of LVSI, and stage 2. So these constitute the high intermediate grade. And what do we do? The recommendations are, again, adjuvant brachytherapy can be recommended in almost all the patients to decrease the vaginal recurrence. EBRT may be added for patients who have substantial LVSI for that stage. Adjuvant chemotherapy can be considered especially for high grade or patients with substantial LVSI. Omission of any adjuvant treatment is an option in some of the patients. Now, high intermediate risk, where it is clinically node 0 or lymph node staging has not been performed. So this is again a group which we are to look out for, because this is the group we are going to get most of the patients. Adjuvant EBRT is recommended in this group because of the substantial LVSI. Now, additional adjuvant chemotherapy can also be considered, especially for very high grade or substantial LVSI. Adjuvant brachytherapy alone without a pelvic radiation can be considered for high grade LVSI negative and for stage 2 grade 1 endometrioid cancer. So provided it is LVSI negative and grade 1, then you can go ahead with a brachytherapy alone. This is a very, very rare group of patients. You hardly get to see this group of patients. The fourth group is the high risk. This is out and out high risk group. These are the stage 3, 4A with no residual disease, stage 1 to 4A non-endometrioid carcinomas. So these are the patients who belong to the high risk group. Recommendations are without any dilemma, EBRT with concurrent and adjuvant chemotherapy, or alternatively sequential chemotherapy and radiotherapy is recommended. Chemotherapy alone is also an alternative option, seeing the general status of the patient. Carcinoma sarcomas, as Dr. Abraham said, they are treated as high-risk carcinomas, and no more they are called as sarcomas. So the last is the advanced or the metastatic stage, that is the 3, 4A and 4B. So for this group of patients, then here again, surgical debulking is sometimes needed for enlarged lymph nodes. So our surgical oncologist should see. Primary systemic therapy is very important and should be used upfront if surgery is not feasible or acceptable. Now, in case there is a good response to the systemic therapy, then also a delayed surgery can be considered. Only enlarged lymph nodes should be resected, and systemic lymphadenectomy may not be recommended. Now, inoperable patients, medically inoperable, we can give brachytherapy and external beam radiation, which are non-surgical, that is non-operable surgically, which is uncommon generally, but EBRT and brachytherapy can be given. ICRT, that is brachytherapy alone, can be given in lone cases of stage 1A, grade 1, grade 2 lymph node negative. So this is one group where the pelvic radiation can be done with, and only ICRT, that is the brachytherapy, can be given. So that was the end to my slide. I'm sure this is equally mind-boggling and is quite strenuous. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Thank you very much. It's a nice presentation and nice new slides. But there are some questions in the chat box.
Yes.
Dr. Parveen Akhtar Banush is one of our senior radiation oncologists working.
Yes.
Madam, do you like to?
Like I said,
Madam, do you like to ask your question?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to know what about wild type P53 mutation cases? So should we consider this group of patients as less aggressive than normal P53 mutated cases?
See,
Wild
like,
type.
yeah.
Okay.
See, like I said, P53, abnormal P53, they are supposed to be bad, and overexpressed, they are bad. But like I said, we are still not. It is still in the trials whether you need to change your treatment protocol according to that. So till now, we are not doing that, but maybe only on the trial you can do that. We are not going to change the protocol.
Okay. Thank you.
So there's a similar question: how will you interpret a pole-mutated endometrial carcinoma report? Yeah, like I said, the pole-mutated, so they are probably the luckiest people. A pole-mutated, they are very good, excellent tumors. So a low-risk tumor, a low-risk endometrial carcinoma, pole-mutated. So instead of giving brachytherapy, we might as well let them go. But again, there are two things. I repeat that if you do not have the pole mutation, they can be omitted in the low risk patients because you do not overtreat the patient by not considering this treatment. And the second thing is that even now, even with this much of evidence, we are still not using them for determining the treatment. But they are those group of patients who have excellent prognosis.
Another question is from the participants, Dr. Arman Reza. What are the molecular tests we advise in carcinoma endometrial patients?
Yeah, see, it depends, what kind of facilities you have. So, like I said, there are 3 IHC tests, and one is the molecular test, which you need to do. In our hospital, we have just started with the P53s. We are doing the pole mutations. We have started the ELICAM. We have started. So these are basically. Again, it depends, what kind of provision you have. We have started doing these 3 tests for these patients.
Usually we routinely advise the P53 for all our endometrial carcinoma patients.
Yeah, at least, maybe it's to start with
single at least P53.
So how actually I have another question. How you get the report of P53? Is it in percentage, and what is the cutoff value you think important?
Again, I won't be able to say that.
35%?
The values.
35% probably.
35?
Probably. I have as far as I know. Is there anybody who can answer here? Probably, as far as I know, it is 35%.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. It is less than 35%. That is called the wild type, and in that cases, there is the rule of the follow-up. But I have a question. Yes, to Dr. Swarupa Mitra, ma'am. Yes, if the patients, they have around the 6 years lady, she has undergone the staging laparotomy with hysterectomy, bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy, pelvic para-aortic lymphadenectomy, and final histopathology report. If there is the endometrial carcinoma, endometrioid type, grade 2, less than half myometrial invasion, but her molecular markers, her P53 is positive, 60 years lady. In that cases, what will be her next treatment plan?
This is exactly a patient we just now had. In fact, we discussed in the tumor board. So ideally, if the P53 we did not have, we would have probably given her a brachytherapy or let her go. But since the P53 overexpressed,
yes,
and the present guidelines, the 2020 guidelines, they say very categorically that all patients who are P53 overexpressed or abnormal should be given radiochemotherapy.
Both, yeah.
So here in this case, we would give a chemoradiotherapy, and we are giving according to the POTEC 3 trial.
Yeah. Chemotherapy plus vaginal brachytherapy or external brachytherapy plus vaginal, both.
Brachytherapy, again, if we go by the American Brachytherapy Society, brachytherapy is given only when the vaginal cuff is positive or there is a closed margin over there. But again, as a practice, I think all Asian countries, all of us, we are giving brachytherapy to most of the patients who are receiving pelvic radiation. But if we go by the guidelines, pelvic brachytherapy, vault radiation therapy is only given to when it is a closed margin over there or a positive margin in the vaginal cuff.
Yeah, ideally it should be done if closed margin or positive. Otherwise,
Yes,
what is the value or what is the idea of giving vaginal brachytherapy?
Exactly.
It is not contributing much to the pelvic lymph nodes.
So in this case, chemotherapy plus pelvic radiation. Yeah.
Pelvic radiation. Yes.
Another patient, if she has diagnosed as a case of stage 4 endometrial cancer, that is endometrioid type, which is the grade 3, the liver metastasis, and she received the 6-cycle chemotherapy, the palliative chemotherapy, and she has also ascites. But after completions of chemotherapy and everything, she 6 months even after follow-up, she has, and on PET scan, she has no disease, and all the metastatic disease in the liver, it is not visible, it is completely remission, and no other disease anywhere. Can we go for the surgery in this patient?
I think Dr. Abraham will be able to say that better. But I think he
Abraham, sir, are you here? Abraham, sir?
Yeah, sorry, I just stepped out. What is the question again?
Sir, if a patient, that we have a patient who she was around 55 or 50 years around this age, and she was diagnosed of the endometrial carcinoma, endometrioid type, the type grade 3, and she had the metastatics in the liver and also ascites. She received palliative chemotherapy for 6 cycles, and 6 months after, 4 months, sorry, around 4 to 5 months after completion of her chemotherapy, a PET scan was done, and the PET scan report showed there is no disease in the liver, and there is also no hair in the disease, and there is something, it is thought that it is complete remission of the disease. In that cases, do we go for the surgery for this patient? In
Yeah,
this
advanced endometrial cancer,
Yes, sir.
we usually give chemotherapy first and operate after 3 to 4 cycles. So if she's had 6 cycles, and then she could have had surgery if there was no disease outside the
Yes, sir.
uterus. So I would at least do a palliative hysterectomy at that stage. But if
Yes.
she has disease in the chest or anywhere else, then this hormonal therapy or
So PET CT shows no metastatic disease, and there is the complete, probably there is the suggest that there is the complete remission of the disease. There is no disease in the liver. There is multiple livers and metastasis,
Yeah.
and
So
after
you-
that, now, yeah,
then just removing the uterus,
Yes.
I think would still be an option. I mean, though 4 months have gone by, it could have been done earlier.
yes, sir. Okay, thank you. If there anybody have any questions, you please ask. Either you may ask directly or you may put your question in the chat box. Sometimes we get the patients that they come with us with the only simple hysterectomy and the keeping the ovaries back. In that cases, can we go for removing the ovary in endometrioid type of carcinoma endometrial? Sir, Abraham sir. Dr. Sharupa, please, can you answer?
I don't know if the what age is the patient in?
Is around the 45 or 50 years. In that cases, sometimes we get the patients who have come the only after simple hysterectomy, keeping the ovary in back. In that cases, can we go for the revision surgery to removing the ovary?
I think it would be better to review the slides first, and if it is a advanced grade, like I said, the high risk patient, young patient, I think it is worth it to go for a resurgery.
If anybody can ask any question, you please ask. Otherwise, we may, after showing the poll questions, we'll conclude the session. So the good discussions, but before that is, we have another oncologist, Dr. Kudroti Elahi. Dr. Kudroti Elahi, sir. Are you here, sir? No, she's not here. She left. But Dr. Torit Kumar Shomadar. Would you like to comment? Torit, please. There is nobody. So there is the lively discussion. We are very much happy and we are very much grateful to all the faculties and all the participants, because the participants, they are the key of our sessions. Without their participation, we cannot continue the sessions, and we are always grateful to our faculties that they, for the last several months, they are supporting us, and I think they will help us and they will support us in continuously in future. And advance the Eid greetings to all the participants and also our faculties. And before the ending the session, I would like to request Mrs. Shorna to show the poll questions again, and the participants are requested for poll voting.
I wish everyone a very happy Eid. Eid Mubarak, ma'am, and everybody. Have a very happy Eid.
Yes,
Thank you.
Shorna, this time 30 seconds on the part question.
Okay, ma'am.
This is 45% positive answer. Yeah, 43% correct answer. Yeah. Then third question. It's 65, 69%, 68% correct answers. Yeah. This is the end of the poll sessions. Probably our scientific secretary, Dr. A.F.M. Kamaluddin, he has joined, he has just completed probably her prayer. And before the getting the poll results, I would like to request Dr. A.F.M. Kamaluddin Bhai to comment and for giving the Eid greetings to our faculties and all the participants. Kamal Bhai, please.
Thank you, Shahana. First, my apology for not being in the program because I couldn't join because of the overlap of the time. So thanks to the faculty, Dr. Abraham, and also to Swarupa for giving your time and joining the session. And I see Anwara Madam. Madam, thank you for joining. I mean, all the supports and participation gives us inspiration. And I'm sure that everybody was benefited from the discussion, and Oncology Club is committed to continue this journey and hope everybody will have a nice Eid. But during the Eid, we need to stay safe because still we are in the COVID era. We are not out of it. So we need to stay safe and healthy because doctors are the forefighters. And we are really grateful to all the local and foreign faculties for helping us to carry this program up to this. And we are very much optimistic that this endeavor will continue and the support from our overseas and local faculty will continue. And the most important component is the participants. Every week we are getting 100+ participants. Thanks to all of them. And finally, thanks to Shahana for carrying this program forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kamal Bhai, and thank you. Thanks the Abraham sir, Shorpa Mitra ma'am, and all the participants, and Eid Mubarak to you all. Dr. Kudrati Elahi Bhai, I was just asked you for giving some comments. Do you like to comment, Kudrati Elahi?
No, thank you very much. Actually, I have just gathered knowledge from the discussion from the foreign experts and also from you also. So actually, I participate to learn something. So thank you very much, and Eid Mubarak to you all.
Thank you very much.
Shahana, I want to mention that Dr. Kudratullah is one of the senior oncologists
Yes.
who is joining in all the program. And what he said, that is educational for all of us.
Yes.
Like Dr. Kudratullah or Anwara Madam, their participation is the inspiration for all of us, because at this time, with their so much commitment, they are joining us with our program and helping us and supporting us. That is very, very important. Thanks to all the seniors, especially.
Thank you, Dr. Kamal. I participate because we have some students, so I have to learn something to teach them also. That is the
Thank you
main
very
philosophy.
much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Dr. Rukia Begum, she's from Chittagong, Professor. Dr. Rukia Begum, she was retired professor from Chittagong Medical College, and Anwara Madam. Anwara Madam, I request you to give some comment to our today's presentation, Madam. I am sorry that I couldn't find you, so I couldn't recognize you. So please.
Thank you, Shahana. Thank you, Shahana. It was a lively session, and I learned a lot, because we are In fact, we are lagging behind about all this advanced management. So it is very important for us also. Though we are quite senior, but we learned a lot from this discussion. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, madam. Thank you very much. Rukia Appa, please, do you like to comment? Dr. Rukia Begum, she is our regular participant. Professor Rukia Begum from Chittagong Medical College. She is professor and retired professor. Rukia Appa. Rukia Appa.
Shahana, I gave my final prof exam to Anwana madam. So I became a doctor because she allowed me to pass the final exam. So I'm grateful to madam. She was the external in Mamising Medical College. So Abraham, so you are in Muscat now?
Yes, I am in Muscat.
Now out of quarantine, joined the hospital.
Yes. Quarantine was for the first 10 days. And
Yep.
it's a new hospital, so we're just starting up the program.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Eid Mubarak to all of you. Thank you very much.
Eid Mubarak. We'll be in touch. We'll be meeting each other, inshallah, virtually after the holiday again.
Of course. Okay. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you, sir. Sharupa, please show the poll owners, please. Sorry, Sharupa, Dr. Sharna, please. Sharna. Yes. The poll owner today are Dr. Saira, Dr. Fahmida Elahin, and Dr. Dali Akhtar. All the winners are requested to put your phone number on the chat box. Otherwise, we cannot communicate with you. You please put your phone number on the chat box. Dr. Saira, Dr. Fahmida, and Dr. Dalia.
So I think we can finish. Shahana.
Yes, yeah. Thank you all. Eid Mubarak to you all. And Sharna, please end the session.